Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help promote the channel more. If you enjoy listening to the following story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. Camp Wanahee, Part 8. This fantastic story is written by Wanahee, a wonderful author over on Reddit's NoSleep subreddit. To catch up, click the links for a compilation. Does everybody remember the kids that went missing at the beginning of our little quest? So, it turns out the little bastards have converted. They snuck back into camp before we returned from our trip. Now they keep on trying to get the other kids to join Melixodrak's side and start sacrificing each other, so that's not great. We keep tying them up, but they still manage to get out somehow. They also smile too much, like when Jehovah's Witnesses missionaries are trying to get you to take their pamphlets. Fingers crossed that we can end all of this soon. Anyway, back to day 3 of our trip to find the traveller. We stood in silence, staring at the revelations on the page. "She's the Faceless?" Maria whispered. "She can't help us." "Unless we find a way to kill the parasite, right?" Marcus asked, looking at both of us. "I don't think she killed herself. We've encountered 2 others, neither of which screamed. Maybe she's still alive and that's why she screams." "It's been almost 110 years, Marcus," I said, sitting down on the floor, my back against the hutch. "How can she survive this long?" "I don't know, man. She was able to travel to different planes of existence. It's possible she doesn't need food or water." He seemed hopeful, but I didn't feel the same way. "We came all this way and it's been a fucking waste. The traveller can't help us," I thought. I heard boots on the stairs. Coop came into the study soon after. He looked at all of us. "Well, what did you find?" "A journal," Maria said as she pushed the book across to him. He picked it up and began reading. Coot laughed and tossed it back onto the desk before he turned and left the room. "Where the hell are you going, Coot?" I asked. "I'm going to kill the Faceless, Carl. I told you I was going to. Now it seems like the only way to save the world, since the traveller might somehow still be alive inside of this parasite," he said over his shoulder. I heard his boots on the stairs. Marcus looked after him, then turned to both of us. "I'm going with him. I think she's still alive and it's the best chance we have of ending all of this. You guys coming?" Maria looked at me. I just shook my head and looked at the floor. "What? You just want to sit here and let the world end?" "Coot's a fucking idiot," I said. "He has been full of shit this whole time, and if he wants to go out and get himself killed now, he can go right ahead. If some all-powerful planar travelling entity can't stop this infection, he definitely can't, and neither can any of us. There's just no way we can do it. So, I will not go out and vainly try to stop the end of the world. I will wait right here and accept it when it comes. There isn't anything worth saving in this world anyways. I'm surprised it didn't end sooner." I got out one of the 2 remaining jars of moonshine and began drinking it. "Really, there isn't a single reason you don't want this world to end?" Maria asked. "Not one reason?" "No, Maria, there isn't one." She gave a single pained laugh. I could see tears welling up in her eyes. "Well, I do. I have a few of them. And I'm going to go out there and try to save them, even if it means I might die. Even if one of them doesn't fucking care." She stormed out of the room. Marcus looked at me. "I hope you figured out all of your issues, Carl." He turned to leave. "Yeah, fuck you too, Marcus," I said. He shook his head as he left the room. I felt like vomiting. I had to force myself to drink more of the moonshine, wanting nothing more than to be enveloped into drunken oblivion. I was angry at this whole situation, and mostly myself. I didn't ask for any of this. All I wanted was to write books. I wanted to spend a summer at a camp. I wanted to live a normal life. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would matter, that would be remembered. I didn't want to keep a bunch of stupid kids safe from things that shouldn't exist, and then be forgotten as soon as they left. I heard the three of them leave. I sat in silence for a long time. This wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for you, Ruby, I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. I could have been happy if I hadn't met you here. I could have forgotten all of this, if I hadn't been drawn to you somehow, if you hadn't made me like you, hadn't convinced me to have a relationship neither of us would remember. I thought it was pointless, but you fucking convinced me. If you hadn't asked me to go into the woods to look at the stars, none of this would have happened. Fucking hell, you would still be alive if we hadn't met. I can't even go out and die in a blaze of glory like Coot, trying to kill the thing that took you. I haven't ever seen it again. The tears were flowing now. I can't even die in the way I deserve. Fuck. I can't even die right. I'm so sorry, Ruby. I wish I would have died instead. I can't stand the guilt. I wish it was me. If not that, then I wish it would have taken me as well. And the dam broke. All of the emotions poured into me and I broke down. I cried until my body hurt from sobbing. My voice became hoarse and my head throbbed. I cried until I was numb, until all I could do was stare. And as I stared, I thought. Tried to make sense of all of the emotions, which I began to understand. No one else deserved this anger, I felt. Just me. I was the one it should have been directed at all along. I wanted to put the blame on others. I wanted to blame her, blame the thing that took her, blame anyone but me. No one else deserved it though. With that, my mind was made up. Alright, I thought as I stood up. First things first, stop the end of the world, then deal with all of this shit in my head, if we succeed. I took one last sip of moonshine and put it back in my pack. I didn't know how long I had been wallowing in my own pity, but it was long enough that the others were definitely far ahead of me. I left the house in a rush, leaving behind my crutch. Maria would chew me out for it later, but I needed to be able to move quicker. Besides, my foot was healing quite a bit better anyways. I began jogging. I couldn't see their flashlights, nor could I hear them. I hoped I would be able to reach them before they started doing whatever they planned. I don't know how much time passed, but I surprisingly didn't come across any of the faceless as I made my way back to the cave entrance. I soon came across the very strong smell of alcohol which burnt my nose. Confused, I stopped and looked around with my flashlight. I saw the ground glitter a short distance away. I went over and found the remains of the jar of moonshine I had thrown earlier. More shocking, I found the parasite on the tree had begun turning black and large parts were cracking and falling off. I quickly got out one of the other jars and poured a little bit on another tree that had not been hit by any of the previous alcohol. There was a hiss as it hit the parasite, and I could see the tendril on the tree wave wildly from pain. The spot blackened almost immediately, and grey started to spread from it. The moonshine. Somehow, the Vernon brothers, the absolute batshit crazy son of a bitches they were, had made something that could kill the parasite. We might be able to do this after all. I grabbed my pack and started running. I didn't know how long I had. I could hear the muffled screaming coming from somewhere. I heard a commotion. Someone cried out, followed by the sound of gunfire. I ran faster. I didn't know how many of the creatures there were. Likely more than 2 jars of moonshine could handle, but there would hopefully be time to take out all of them later. Right now, we only had to take out one and pray the person inside was still alive. I heard a few more gunshots as I ran. Thankfully nothing chased me this time. I realised for the first time that I wasn't running away from danger. I felt like an absolute lunatic doing it, and self-preservation was screaming at me to stop, but I ignored it. It felt freeing. I saw a flash of blue and felt a concussive blast hit me, almost knocking me over. As I shook my head and began running again, I heard limbs above and around me breaking, followed by several impacts. Looking around me, I saw several faceless writhing on the ground. None of them were dead, but many appeared to have broken bones and were attempting to move the now broken bodies that they were using. A few looked to have fared better than others. Coot had definitely brought some heavy stuff with him. That would be great if it hadn't put me in the middle of a bunch of the faceless. I could hear yelling now, definitely Coot. Knowing that there might be some that would likely chase me, I decided to sprint the rest of the way, hoping to avoid as many as possible. I saw flashlights moving around wildly. "I'm coming! Don't fucking shoot me!" I screamed. "Carl?" Maria called back. "Hurry! Coot is hurt and we need to get out of here." More gunshots rang out. "Keep going! I'll catch up!" I yelled. As I ran, I finally saw them. Several of the faceless were chasing them. Some had bullet wounds, others looked like they'd been burned. A couple had limbs or necks at awful angles, but they did not give up their pursuit. I pulled out one of the mason jars out of a side pocket. As I approached one of the faceless, I took a mouthful and spat it all over its face as I passed. It began flailing wildly, clawing at his face before stumbling. I did this twice more and broke through the pack to where the others were. My lungs were on fire. I didn't know how much longer I could run. The cavern narrowed. There was light up ahead. I saw Coot was bleeding from a wound in his side, but it didn't appear too bad. Maria had been slashed across her back. Blood was spreading across her shirt. As we came into the more narrow portion of the tunnel, I could hear the facelesses pursuing us getting closer. I turned and threw one of the jars at the ceiling behind me. I didn't stop to look, but I heard the sound of the glass shattering, followed by a satisfying hiss as the concoction rained on them. Bodies tumbling to a stone floor soon followed. We closed in on the entrance. Coot went through first, followed by Maria, then Marcus. I turned to look behind me as I neared the mouth and saw that a good 6 or so faceless were writhing and turning black in a mass of bodies. The parasite fell away and revealed the faces beneath, long dead and cold, all but one. But that's only because they didn't have a head. That was an odd, since none of the other creatures had any missing limbs. The headless one continued to struggle. Apparently not enough of the moonshine had splashed onto it. Part of the parasite did slough away on the shoulder, rendering the arm useless. My curiosity was cut short. From the blackness beyond I heard a scream, and saw the faceless. Apparently uninjured and not planning on letting us get away, she leapt over the bodies and was sprinting at me. She had never been this fast before, but this was her home. She knew it best, of course. She would be able to traverse it so much quicker. I turned and ran. The faceless was gaining ground faster than I could grab the other jar of moonshine. I felt stupid for not having it readily available. As I ran, I took off my pack. I turned the corner where the boulder was and saw the others were outside the opening. I threw the pack at them. "Grab the moonshine! Main pocket!" I screamed as I moved through the narrow crack. "She's right behind me! Get the moonshine on her!" None of them were ready for this. By that I mean they had let my pack hit the ground. I heard a pop as it impacted. The faceless slammed into the boulder behind me and began making its way through the crack, reaching and clawing at me. The others scrambled to the back and I could hear the sounds of shattered glass as they opened it. I was at the mouth of the crack. "Get whatever you can!" I felt something grab my shirt and yank me back. I hit the ground hard. The air knocked out of me and my ears rang. I saw the faceless appear as the tongue whipped out, wrapped around my neck, cutting off my shout of surprise. I grabbed at it, tried to claw or rip it somehow. It wasn't working. My face began to feel swollen as it lifted me upwards. I couldn't do anything but stare at the skin-covered face, watching as it screamed. It was only now that I noticed how anguished that sound truly was. She was still alive. She was still alive after all of this time, and she knew what was going on. She knew what would happen. Shit, I thought. I guess there were much worse fates at Wanahee. As I was lifted by my throat, time seemed to slow and stretch. I was terrified, but also at peace. I tried my best and ultimately I had failed. There was some sort of comfort in that though. I welcomed whatever was to happen next. My mind and vision started to fuzz from lack of blood and oxygen. I heard a roaring shout, and as my sight began to tunnel, I saw someone run up and stab something into the screaming mouth of the faceless. The tongue around my neck unravelled and I hit the ground again. I was coughing and gasping for air. I heard the screaming of the faceless become clear. I saw her collapse. Coot standing with a large shard of glass in his hand, blood dripping from it. Hands grabbed me, pulling me up and away. There was silence on that switchback. Wind blew through the trees below, rustling the trees below us and sending waves of movement through them as it passed. Coot stood silently over the faceless, breathing heavily as he looked down at her. The creature writhed as the parasite greyed and blackened. It cracked and fell away, revealing the gaunt and sallow features of the woman we had come searching for. "Move! Get away!" It was barely a whisper from her. She was very weak, but the intensity was still there. The tongue of the parasite was moving wildly. It found Coot's leg, wrapping around it. Coot cried out as it yanked and buckled his knee, causing him to fall, the shard of glass flying out of his hand. I pushed the two away from me and grabbed my pack. I grabbed a shirt that was soaked with the moonshine. I ran over and rang it out over the maw, which gnashed wildly, trying to pull Coot's leg inside. He fought hard against it. The entirety of the parasite shuddered as the moonshine splashed across it and within its mouth. The tongue loosened and Coot moved away. Marcus and Maria were by my side moments later, wringing out articles of my clothing. A symphony of hissing could be heard as the parasite blackened. A foul smoke roiled, smelling of burnt hair and a frat house bathroom after a kegger. The rest of the parasite fell away, revealing the nude, dangerously thin figure beneath, breathing weakly. I heard the rustling of a pack and a plastic bag being ripped open. Coot came up next to us, holding a bottle with a beautiful white and sky blue liquid swirling inside. "Drink this," he said as he held it to the woman. As she did, she seemed to regain some of her strength. Marcus and I helped her up slowly. "Thank you," she rasped. "Please, we must leave." "Already called us a ride, lady," Coot said. He handed her an oversized Camp Wanahee t-shirt, which she accepted. It featured a child's drawing of the camp, with a cute childish rendition of Tree Leg as the mascot. "Very well," she said. The traveller found the piece of glass Coot had used to stab the parasite with. With it, she cut her finger and used the blood to draw a symbol on the ground. She whispered something and a shimmer crossed the opening. The traveller seemed to become weaker as this happened, propping herself against the cliff. "Hopefully this will hold any of the others at bay. We should be safe for a time until whatever way you have of escaping comes to find us." She made her way over to a rock and sat down. Maria joined her and they began talking. While I was trying to get the glass out of my clothing and pack, I saw Marcus go over to the opening where a faint shimmer could be seen. He raised his hand and touched it. It didn't pass through, and there was a kzup sound. He withdrew his hand with a yelp. "Shit, that hurt!" I chuckled. I noticed a pile of clothing on the ground by Coot's pack. I went over and examined it, finding it was a bunch of wool items. "Martha is how we're getting out of here." Coot was standing nearby, eating some jerky. I waited for him to continue, maybe after he had finished his bite of jerky, but he just took another one. Okay, but how? I asked exasperately. I've been training her, Coot replied as he rubbed his temples. I have it figured out, Carl. Get off my back. I looked at Marcus, but he shrugged. I just shook my head and began picking out the shattered pieces of glass from my clothing. After a few minutes, I noticed movement at the entrance of the cave. I saw that one of the faceless had been crawling all this way, the one without the head. It was very shaky as it moved, jerking as the parasite contracted around the frame to move it. The right arm hung limply behind it, most of the infestation there having died and sloughed off. It contacted the barrier and there was another gazut, which just got everyone else's attention. I heard Coot mumble something as he stumbled over to the barrier. He knelt down, his face hidden by shadow. The creature continued to try to find a way past the barrier, only to be met with more zaps and flashes, illuminating Coot's face. For the first time since I had known the man, I saw him crying. Marcus and Maria were standing now. The traveller quietly made her way over to Coot, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch brought him out of his trance and he stood up quickly, wiping his eyes. Take down the barrier, he said as he moved past her, going to his pack. The traveller didn't do anything. She seemed to be staring at him, evaluating Coot. She took too long for Coot's liking. Are you deaf, woman? He shouted. Take the barrier down. He had a foldable spade in his hand. She turned to me. Do you have more of the concoction to kill the parasite? Yeah, there's still a fair amount left in my clothing that I can wring out onto it. The traveller sighed, drawing several shapes in the air and waving her hand. The sound of static filled the air for a brief moment, and the faceless began moving forward again. Coot made his way over to me and I gave him a shirt that still had a fair amount of moonshine in it. The hissing of its contact with the parasite's skin filled the air, followed by the acrid smell. None of us said anything as the creature which had controlled Vicky's body for nearly 50 years finally died. He wiped away the dead portion of the parasite that remained before wrapping her body in a green tarp. I made my way over to him and began helping him to wrap her. I expected him to lash out at me, to yell, to do something. He only met my eyes and nodded. Coot looked old, so much older than he ever had before. Like all of the years and worry and silent suffering had finally caught up with him at this moment. He lifted her up, not needing my help for her petite frame. I picked up the spade that he had dropped and we began walking further up the trail. Marcus, Maria and the traveller had their heads bowed as we walked past. None of us said anything as we made our way up the side of that mountain. I knew there was nothing that could be said, so we walked in silence, passing several switchbacks before we came to a shelf that overlooked the forested valley. It looked so peaceful from here. Where do you want the grave to be? I asked. Coot gently set her body down. He looked worn out and he winced as he touched his side. The spot, which had been covered in bandages, was wet, the blood having seeped through them as we made the climb. Still, he came over to me and reached for the spade. I'll do it. No, I said with quiet determination. You'll get your turn, I promise. Just rest for now. Take some time. There was an emotion I couldn't discern in his eyes at that moment, and I thought he was going to protest some more. Instead, he looked over the valley. Bury her right there, he said, pointing a few feet away. She'd love the woods. She would want a front row seat to watch over it. The digging was slow. The small folded spade was not the most effective tool, but it got the job done. After I had dug several feet down, Coot came over and helped me out of the hole, where he replaced me. After an hour, the hole was finished. It wasn't the greatest or the cleanest, but I was still proud of it. I helped Coot out of the hole. He walked over and gathered up Vicky's remains, cradling her in his arms. He passed her to me as he got back into the hole, where I placed her back into his arms. Coot laid her down, then placed his hand on her chest, where he held her for a few moments. Then he straightened up and I helped him out of the hole again. The two of us began pushing the dirt into the hole. Not long after, Vicky's grave had been filled, and the two of us stood silently over it as the wind blew lazily past us. Coot took in a shaky breath. I didn't know it was her that I tripped. I thought it was someone else and that Vicky was off ahead of me, he said quietly. Vicky and I were dating before we came here. We decided it would be fun to be counsellors together because of how much we love the outdoors. I lost track of her in the confusion. I thought she was ahead of me. I only figured out she wasn't with us when we were already inside the cabin, and it was too late to help her when I had figured out what I had done. I didn't respond. I turned my head to look at him. He continued to look at the grave at his feet. It was a mistake, but I was still the reason she died. There's no way around it, he said, his voice trembling. I've had to live with it all of these years. I know you will have to deal with your mistake for a long time as well. I don't know what took Ruby. The thing you described was something I'd never seen before. Maybe that traveller woman knows. I have no idea. All I know is that you have some things to work out, and you're going to have time to do it here. Try to make the best of it. Try to be better. It took me far too long to figure out that's what I should have been doing all along. Not just acting like I was different. It took me until today to figure that out. I'm sorry, Coot. I know, he whispered. So am I. I put my hand on his shoulder. You ready? Coot nodded and we made our way back down to where the others were waiting for us. Not long after, we heard beating wings and looked out to see Martha, the moth bear, flying towards us in the early afternoon sunlight. I'd never been too close to Martha because she was still part bear, and that's not something I want to risk. But being this close and her beating wings, threatening to blast us off the cliff, I realised how absolutely massive this creature was. Easily 9 feet long and a wingspan of 30 feet. She was absolutely massive. Martha landed by the pile of clothing and began eating. Coot placed a harness over her, which was something he had apparently thought about bringing. To this he attached a large net which hung underneath. Coot informed us that we could all fit in the net, though it would be uncomfortable. None of us cared. Coot clambered into the saddle, giving some instructions for Martha to begin hovering. The four of us placed our things into the slack net and climbed into it. Soon we were flying over the forests surrounding Wanahee. Watching the trees pass so effortlessly beneath us was surreal. So much ground covered in such a short time. After 20 minutes, we passed over a clearing that I'd never seen before. As we came over it, I saw that the trees had been cut down, and there was a massive symbol glowing in the middle of it. It glowed so brightly that it hurt to look at directly, and when combined with a disorientating orange glow, gave me a sense of vertigo. I saw numerous horrors milling around. The variety was stunning, each one terrible in its own way. Wait, the traveller said as she leaned over the net to look down. There was a tremble in her voice. There's something in Melixodrak. That's why we came looking for you, I said. She said something in a language I didn't know, and didn't sound like it came from our realm of reality. I didn't understand it, but it made me immediately queasy. Can we stop it? Maria asked. The traveller didn't say anything for a time. Possibly. She said nothing else as she stared downwards. Marcus, Maria and I all shared looks. Of course, things weren't going to be easier with a trans-dimensional being. As we crossed into the clearing of the camp, there was a strange tingling sensation. I also had the taste of hydrogen peroxide in my mouth. This seemed to comfort the traveller, but I didn't care to ask why, assuming it had to do with some sort of magic. We landed and we were met by Chuita and the rest of the counsellors. Coot, who seemed to be going strong, began to talk to them about what had happened. The rest of us saw to our injuries. Maria needed a few stitches for her back, which I had to do. Not a fan, by the way. Marcus had a change of bandages, and I was cleared to walk around without a crutch. We helped the traveller find a place to stay and got her some food. Once this was done, I passed out in my cabin. Finally, you've all pretty much caught up on what has been going on. We have some plans set to go and possibly stop this summoning. I hope we can. The players are starting to get real appealing. I mean, there's also the whole world ending thing I hope to stop, but the whole itching nail thing is currently much more annoying. Priorities get a little messed up at the end of the world, I guess. See you all soon. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they really would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. And if you'd like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I'll feature it in one of the videos. Have you written a creepypasta story you would like me to narrate? Have you had any cryptid sightings, paranormal or supernatural encounters, or even had a creepy or terrifying situation you would like to share? Well, I now have my very own subreddit community where you can submit your stories. The link for that is also in the thumbnail as well as below in the description. You can submit your stories there, or you can send them to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. Now I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit and Discord. And if you'd like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit and Discord. And if you would like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. And any and all donations would be gratefully received. Again, that will also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.